Hello and welcome to another very, very special Inside FSR video for 2024. My name is Ed Hunter. I'm of course commentator on Pro and Academy and the World Championship highlights, if you've ever watched any of those. And alongside me is Evolution Motorsport's very own Tom Oldenmenger. So Tom, beginning of the year there was obviously a bit of a shock for you. You had a very nasty concussion that you've spent a lot of the year recovering from. It's great to have you back, and we've always been waiting to do one of these until you got a little bit better, and I'm very, very glad to have you alongside me. How you doing?
Well, better than at the start of the season. The timing was, it was right before the season started, so that wasn't ideal. The season was over before it started, and it's been quite rough, but I've been slowly recovering. Like if I compare how I felt at the final race compared to the first race, it's like day and night difference, but still not fully recovered, but I guess if we have 6 months until the start of next season, I should be good to go by then. But let's talk about something more interesting, I guess, because we had an amazing World Championship season.
Indeed we did, yes. A very exciting, unpredictable, and in a way a very, very unexpected pair of title contenders at the end of it. So let's cast our minds back, Tom, to the beginning of the season, of course. At the end of 2023, it was basically Simoncic versus Danahan versus Jordan versus Spork, wasn't it? Of course, Colin Spork not returning, Jake Danahan being hired by Race Clutch alongside another young man called Owen McGaugie, who ended up playing a big role in the season. Jannick Simoncic moving to FSR eSports, of course, alongside Michi Horikoff, so those two reuniting. So there were a lot of big stories. And I think we all sort of went in thinking it was going to be Simoncic fighting for that fifth title and the likes of Danahan and Jordan fighting him for it. And initially in Bahrain, it sort of seemed that was the way it was going because Danahan, of course, took pole and won. But the interesting thing about Bahrain was the different strategies that we saw, because most went for a free stop, but a couple like Manuel Biancalila, Jannick Bock, Dennis Jordan all went for two stops, if I'm not mistaken. And Jan Grankvist used it especially well, got his first podium, was only about 2 seconds shy of Danahan in that fight for victory. And that sort of ended up being, I think, the running theme of the season, with all these different strategies converging very, very closely at the end amongst all the front runners.
Yeah, and also who chose to go for longer stints and less stops, because Bock often went for a stop less and the harder compounds, and Race Clutch often went for the softer compound and just pushed all the way through. But it was really interesting to see how it always converged right at the end, so I think that's a really good job from the development team of FSR to improve the tires from last year and really make different strategies very viable, and how you use them makes a big difference to how effective you are with them. And it showed almost every race there were multiple strategies possible, and in the end it was very close to which strategy actually was better.
Of course, so moving on to round 2, Melbourne in Australia, and it sort of ended up being, for me, a bit of a microcosm of how the season played out in total, because McGaugie took his very first pole position in only his third start, started on the hards, got overtaken by Bock on the mediums in the first stint, and then once they switched tyres at the end, Bock on the hards, McGaugie on the mediums, McGaugie was able to go around the outside at the sort of turn 11-12 complex, get back through, and won ultimately. So like I said, in only his third start, he stands on the top step of the podium. Meanwhile, there was a huge fight for third between Danahan, Simoncic and Alex Siebel. All three of them crashed into each other, and that ended up handing third and fourth to Biancalila and Grankvist, who was sort of pretty quietly sort of minding their own business for the vast majority of the race. And so Grankvist ended up leading the championship, bizarrely, which I don't think anybody expected at that stage of the season, of course. And Jan, I think, was pretty ill in Australia, said after the race, wow, I'm really happy with that.
Yeah, like you said, it was a kind of a template for how the entire season went, including all the bad luck for Simoncic. I want to give a shout out to my ex-teammate there, and multiple world champion. Yeah, we expected a lot more from him, but he had so much bad luck. And same with Dennis Jordan, I guess. Like, it's good that us sim racers don't have to pay for the damages and the lost front wings, because they would probably have to retire from all the damage that they sustained throughout the season, and basically took both of them out of running for this championship. and then that gave room for a newcomer, I guess, like McGaugie, to take charge and take the championship at the end.
Yeah, it was amazing to see him adapt so quickly, especially having only really done the one race at the very end of 23 at Interlagos, where I think he came 14th in that race for the race clutch. So it was great to see him progress so quickly and sort of really put his weight behind FSR. And like you say, it ended in that very, very close title fight. But of course, in the next couple of races, it wasn't necessarily McGaugie that took the most advantage. It was actually Evolution Motorsport's very own Jannick Bock, of course, a double Super League champion, looking for that first FSR title so he could become, the very first person to win in GPV Super League, the highest league there, and in FSR World Championship, which is, of course, our highest championship as well. So, Hockenheimring. You were talking about Jene Simoncic having one of his worst starts to a season ever. He started to put that right in Hockenheim, got onto the front row and then won. First win for Rafa Esports as well, which is certainly noteworthy. While Race Clutch and Jan Grankvist four-stopped. I think Jake Dennehan three-stopped, but McGaugie and Grankvist four-stopped essentially. And used, I think, 3 sets of soft tyres and ended up essentially getting stuck in traffic while the likes of Bianca, Bock and Jordan all ended up fighting for second. Bianca pushed Bock off track, got a bit of a penalty, 1 place penalty, I think, on this occasion. So that handed Bock second, and a sort of joint points lead, I think, with Bianca. So that shows you just how mixed up the first 3 rounds of the season were, with nobody really taking full control then. The very next one was Singapore, of course, and I think Singapore was probably a very, very big turning point because that was the race Dennehan had to miss due to a shoulder injury. Petr Brujak, I think, stood in, and McGaugie effectively had to become the team leader of Race Clutch because I think Brujak was standing in at very, very short notice. So McGaugie took pole, and then there was absolutely chaotic first lap. I think 11 cars involved in a collision at the Anderson Bridge in the sort of mid-pack. And then McGaugie, Bianchi and Simoncic were all pitting early to cover off each other, and Jannick Bock sort of used the overcut, and that was enough to sort of hold off McGaugie at the end on the fresher tyres then. Although, of course, we should mention that brilliant move by McGaugie into the Singapore Sling where he went around the outside of Simoncic, which not a lot of people can say that they've done.
Yeah, absolutely. He had a couple of moves like that. Like, he really showed that he wanted to win this championship. In Turkey, I think he had some really aggressive moves as well, and there were multiple races, I guess, where it was so tight, so close to disaster, but he made it work. It was really impressive to see.
And in Singapore, it is very difficult to overtake just in period. And it's even more so when you're up against the 4-time champion like Jene Simoncic, who defends incredibly well, uses that push to pass to maximum advantage there. But it was, of course, Bock getting that first win for Evolution, which I'm sure you were very happy about as another member of the team, Tom. And he then followed it up at Silverstone with another victory. So that was essentially a battle between Simoncic and Bock for quite a lot of the race, where they were both very aggressive on strategy by pitting early off of the mediums. And then we get to lap 39, where Simoncic has a little bit more bad luck because he selects the wrong paddle on his wheel because he has push to pass and downshift right next to each other. And he explained this really well on his live stream. Almost immediately after it happened, he was surprisingly calm about it, I thought, which really shows how clear-headed he was at sort of instantly realizing where he went wrong. There was a spectacular engine blow-up, and Simoncic was left forlornly by the side of the road. And then the race clutch cars go through, and both of them ended up falling just that little bit short. And in fact, they end up swapping positions, putting Dennehan ahead of McGaugie due to the threat from Janos Braksok, I think, behind, who ended up finishing 4th. And that meant by the end of the 5th round of the season, so midpoint, Bock led McGaugie by 19 points then. And so it was very much advantage Evolution then, which I'm sure you were thrilled to bits about.
Yeah, and it, like you said, it was the turning point of the season because with that DNF, probably from that point on, Jene was out of the championship realistically. But I guess it was also a wake-up call to Race Clutch. And I think from this point on, this is how they won the championship, I think. Because Jake had to miss a race, and Bock was increasing his lead further and further. So I think they sort of woke up and realized, okay, we have to have a number one driver now. Put all our eggs in one basket and make sure that Owen goes for the championship. And yeah, from here on, you can see that it's no longer the two race clutch drivers fighting and both trying to get the best position possible, but really Jake going for the support role, which I think is really kudos to him and to race clutch, where you have two drivers that can fight for the championship, and one of them realizes, well, the other one has the better chance, so I'll just support him. And I mean, how often do we see where having two fast drivers actually backfires for a team? I mean, in Formula 1 you had Rosberg and Hamilton, or Vettel and Webber, and plenty of examples where two of them can go for the championship, so they want to, and then they cost each other points or even crash each other off the racetrack. And that didn't happen for Race Clutch, so that's really well done from the team and from Jake to take up that role, and he executed it perfectly.
Yeah, because I think when they were interviewed at the end of the season, Jake was the one who basically said that he was wondering if it was the right call for him and Owen to swap at Silverstone, because he thought it was basically costing Owen the championship to Jannick Bock there. But of course, the qualifying was always very, very strong, especially McGaugie. I think he got 3 poles in a row, which, if I'm not mistaken, the last person to get 3 poles in 3 consecutive races was SimRacing back in 2017. So, yeah, 7 years ago. So that really shows you how difficult it is.
I will always trust you to be correct on the stats.
Yeah, well... We should talk about the next phase of the season, which, as you imply, was sort of all about race clutch, with them constantly locking out the front row. Not just McGaugie on pole, but Jake Dennehan usually alongside him as well. So Imola and McGaugie absolutely dominates. Bock qualifies 12th and ends up rolling the dice. 1 stops along with Biancalila, and Biancalila sort of ends up reluctantly having to defend for Bock, and ends up taking out, essentially crashing into both of the Rafa cars. But in the end, Bock was pretty much from that point on defenseless on these old hard tyres, just about held on to 5th. Then we get to Istanbul, which was a very, very interesting race. This time, it all came down to strategy. It was 2 stops versus free stop, with Bock on the 2 stop and both of the race clutches on a free stop. And McGaugie has this heroic charge, has a very, very bold overtake on Jordan, where Jordan gives him only just enough space. Overtakes Simon-Chich a couple of times. And then it all comes down to the final lap, I think, where McGaugie is almost just about in DRS range and then makes a mistake just coming into sort of turn 10, essentially. Minor mistake. The rears just start to complain. He has a little dive into 12 from all the way, long way back, but he knew it was never going to pull off. And in the end, Bock just about holds on. So
I really thought he had it. Yeah, he was quick.
I think Owen did as well.
Yeah, but then like the one chance you have is down that straight, and if you mess up the exit, then it's over. So he made one mistake, and it was at a crucial time, and then Bock was able to take it. But it was a bit like Australia, where it showed how they would usually run their races, like race clutch, aggressive, soft tires, pushing all the way, going super aggressive on their overtakes, but somehow it works out, so awesome. And then Bock doing his own thing, going long, going hard, and making it work, well, most of the time.
And doing some impressive time management as well, even though he had mostly clear air for that race. While McGaugie and Dennehan were constantly fighting through the pack, he still had to make sure he wasn't losing enough time for them to catch at the end there. So the traffic definitely helped, but Bock certainly made the difference that day and did a good enough job for McGaugie to sort of just stumble right at the final hurdle. And not a huge stumble, but you could tell it frustrated him, certainly, at the time.
Yeah.
And then he almost immediately in Spa, race clutch made up for it. This is a race where McGaugie and Dennehan changed the lead, I think, 10 or 11 times in total during the race down the Kemmel Straight, where they would just swap past each other. and they built a bit of a wall. So Jordan was in third for a lot of the race, had a couple of goes at Dennehan, but ultimately either had to go off track or just found absolutely nowhere to go, just a wall of red in front of him. And then at the end of the race, I think Jordan runs out push to pass on the run coming up to Blanchimont, and Bock picks both him and Hoyer off in the closing stages. It was a good final stint for Bock to sort of limit the damage. And then we're sort of in this situation, 2 races to go, championship lead is just 3 points then.
Yeah, crazy. And this is one of the best examples of Race Clutch really working together as a team. Yeah, you're right, swapping around, probably to have one driver use the battery, because there's essentially only one place you can really overtake, and that's down the Camel Straight. So if you've got that covered by using a lot of boost and creating a bit of a DRS train, then you can't really overtake, but it costs you a lot of battery, especially at Spa. So I guess that's what they did. One used up their battery, they swapped, so the guy in second could save up some battery and swap again, and then manage to stay in front. And yeah, a bit of a shame for Dennis Jordan. After all the bad luck he had, the podium would have been great for him. But well, as you said, it kept the championship really close, with Bock actually getting him on the final lap. Yeah, and only 3 points difference. So which way is it going to go?
Exactly. So we then went to Circuit the Americas in Austin, Texas in the USA. And that, for me, was one of the most tense races of the season. I wasn't watching live because, unfortunately, it clashed with the Formula E race in London that I was at. So I was sort of on the train home trying to watch a few bits of it on my phone. But it started off very, very exciting. So Jannick Bock qualifies 4th. Qualifies McGaugie, because McGaugie is 2 places behind in 6th. The race begins with Simicic on pole, of course. Yaltan gets an awful getaway. Jannick Bock squeezes in this very narrow gap between himself, Yaltine, and the wall, thinks, okay, that's job done, that's me up to second or third then, I think it was, only to discover McGaugie immediately diving up the inside of him too. Yeah. So it got very, very bunched up into turn 1. Somehow they all got through in one piece, and then it set up a very, very close battle. I think then the next flashpoint I think that's worth talking about is the move that McGaugie makes on lap 22 to snatch a lead from Dennis Jordan. So Jordan starts on the softs, gets to the front to get past Simicic. McGaugie is following him through. There's this crazy move where McGaugie goes for a very, very small gap down the back straight going into turn 12. And then Dennis Jordan gets a huge wobble on. I still to this day I have no idea how Jordan was able to save that one. And in fact, even McGaugie had to wrestle for control as well.
Yeah, that was crazy. Like, I've never seen a car and a steering wheel move that much down the straight going, 300 kph? So, yeah, it was crazy. And well held, I guess, but just shows how hard they're all fighting. And luckily, without any real damage, but could have ended in disaster for, both of them. And therefore the championship.
And it very nearly did end in disaster a couple of laps later, because Jordan, of course, immediately pits at the end of that lap, undercuts McGaugie. And then on lap 31, they're fighting for the lead again. McGaugie makes a late dive into turn 15, the sort of left-hand hairpin, locks with Jordan's rear wheel, and ends up spinning around, losing 3 places. And that basically completely opens the door for Simicic a couple laps later to just breeze past Jordan and retake the lead then. So McGaugie sees himself suddenly on the back foot. Dennehan is trying to help out, lets McGaugie through, and then defends from Jannick Bock. Bock simply goes around the outside of him. And then on lap 38, him and McGaugie are fighting for third and, of course, for the championship lead as a consequence. Bock tries to go around the outside at 13. McGaugie gets a big slide on, goes into full opposite lock, collects Bock's rear wheel, and spins him around. So we've got the 2 title contenders that are just locked together off track. And it doesn't really get too much more dramatic than that.
Yeah, you can really tell that we're getting to the end of the season and every point counts. And I guess in a direct fight, if you finish in front of the other contender, then the points difference counts double. So you definitely want to finish in front of the other. And yeah, you can just see that the moves are getting a little bit more desperate and everything's getting tighter, closer. And unfortunately, it did end in some tears, I guess. And it's interesting that with how close the championship was, in terms of performance and everything, that Bock and McGaugie didn't really have a lot of direct battles, like overtaking each other. But, when they did come together, it was hard, intense, and it was definitely a climax here.
Yeah, it certainly was. So Simoncic ultimately won, fended off Yaltain. Simoncic takes his 31st career victory, and Yaltain takes his first ever podium. McGaugie undercut and pretty much a couple of laps after that incident with Bock to get back past Biancalida and Dennehan, who sort of got through while he was tangled in the gravel trap with Bock. And then ends up coming out on top with against Biancalila, despite being on older tyres than Biancalila in that fight for third. So that was very impressive. And again, Jake Dennehan came to the rescue because he ends up defending from Bock in a very, very intense battle. This time, Jannick Bock, he tried to go for that move at 13 around the outside again. And I think he sort of remembered what happened with McGaugie and decided to leave a little bit more room for the other race clutch driver. And there are a couple of dives into turn one where Bock almost spun around as well. So in the end, Dennehan does just enough and really does a huge job to help his teammate by limiting Bock down to 6th, which means getting into the final race of the season, McGaugie has gotten into the championship lead incredibly for the first time, I think, all season by about 5 points over Jannick Bock.
Yeah, and at a perfect time. Here is another example where the teamwork of Race Clutch and also the quality of both their drivers, where Bock was essentially having to do it on his own. As you could see, qualifying was so important, which hurt Bock throughout the season. Race Clutch executed it well every time, just qualifying at the front, and Pushke was always further back, and from there it's always going to be very difficult to play a big role. And Race Clutch could play the team game often, and especially, as we said, after Silverstone, Jake really took up the role of being the rear gunner and executed it really well, and Suzuka was the perfect example again. I don't know if it was luck, skill, whatever, but somehow it was a 1-2 after the start, and from there on, basically Jake could control the entire field, which was really impressive. Not being overtaken for pretty much the entire race. And,
yeah, I think Biancalila undercut Dennehan at one point, but Dennehan pretty much immediately used DRS and pushed the pass to get back through. And then they were right behind McGaugie and he slowed the pace up once more.
Yeah, so you could see he is proper fast, and without missing Singapore, maybe he could have won the championship. And for sure, all three of them, Owen, Jake, Jannick, would have deserved this championship this year. And Jake showed it by, on the one hand, being able to hold up, the entire WC field. But then when it needed, just unleashed so much pace to secure that second position and be the cork in the bottle once again. And just being able to keep that up for the entire race, keep enough battery to keep in front for the entire race, basically, which was extremely impressive. Boring for the viewer, perhaps, but really well executed by Race Clutch as a team.
I think the term used in commentary was anticlimactic, which certainly in terms of the start of the fight, starting off so close going into the day, ended with a 21-point advantage for McGaugie. But it's got to go to the best driver, and McGaugie was absolutely excellent under huge pressure. Like I say, he nailed that start, and from then on, him and Dennehan just worked in lockstep like they did for pretty much most of the season. And Bock down in 8th. He makes a good move on Michihoya around the outside into Casio Triangle, but unfortunately he's not really able to gain very much ground. Nonetheless, he comes away with second, like you say. So overall in the World Championship, considering Evolution had basically joined up with Red Bull and Ferrari and sort of they'd not really raced under their own branding since about 2021. It was great to see them, take 3 very, very good wins, thanks to Jannick Bock, and almost steal that championship from McGaugie.
Yeah, it was an awesome fight, but perhaps most of the difference was made in qualifying. And had he, for every race, qualified as high as Race Clutch did, then maybe he would have stood a better chance. But he put up a really good fight and was basically exciting until the first corner of the final round. But again, all three of them could have become world champion this year, and all three of them would have deserved it, but Owen came out on top. And I think a large part is that Race Clutch had 2 world-class drivers, and also willing to help each other out when needed, and that made a difference. So yeah, well-deserved champion, I think. And team's champion.
Exactly, yes. Race Clutch, the first ever French teams champions in the FSR World Championship. But speaking of Owen McGaugie, thanks, Tom, to the magic of editing, we can talk to him right now. So let's hear what Owen has to say about his historic rookie championship. And as if by magic, I am joined now by 2024 Formula Sim Racing World Drivers Champion, Mr. Owen McGaugie. So, Owen, you are a champion in your first attempt in your rookie season, and you're the first British champion since Mohammed Patel in 2017. It's been a few weeks since Suzuka now. Has it sunk in what a big achievement this is for you?
I don't think it's going to sink in for a while now. It's been great just thinking back to that final race and the whole season really. You know, it really shocked me that I was in the position to be in this place at the end of the season, and for me to win the championship is just absolutely incredible.
Indeed it was, and it must be said, at the beginning of the season, when you think back to Bahrain, you were actually sort of helping out your teammate Jake Dennehan in that first race by holding up Manuel Biancalila and a couple others in those sort of intense fights in that race. And as the season went on, of course, Jake Dennehan got his shoulder injury at Singapore, and you really had to sort of step up as the team leader. And we can tell by the results that you did a marvellous job of that. And then Jake ended up doing his very, very best to support you in the second half of the season. And you were both very closely matched, especially in qualifying as well. How do you describe your dynamic with Jake Dennehan, and of course how the entire Race Clutch team rallied behind you as the season went on?
With Jake, it's been, we've been friends for quite a while now, a few years, and this was the first time actually being a teammate with him properly.
And he's about the same age as you as well, isn't he?
Yeah, he's about the same. He's a bit younger.
Of course he is.
But yeah, of course. But it's been amazing. Just the amount of work that we put in together was nothing like I've had before with any other teammate, and I gotta say, thank you to him and the team for pushing us in that direction to be testing so much together. And just having one of your good friends as a teammate is a really big help, because you can just bounce off each other, and it's the whole dynamic from practice to race, it all just feels so comfortable, and that really gave me, and probably him as well, a boost in the race, just having us two together like that. And with Race Clutch, the amount of people behind the scenes pushing us, helping with the setup, helping with just everything to do with racing was just a really, really good help, and I can't thank him enough.
That's great to hear. It was a really, really harmonious partnership, it must be said. You're only as good as the opposition you're up against, and you were up against in the title fight a German by the name, of course, of Jannick Bock, who we all know as a double Super League champion. And he was always doing these tyre preservation strategies, constantly doing one stop less. And a lot of races came down to you trying to hunt him down on fresher tyres and battling through traffic. So I think back to Silverstone when Bock had won 2 races in a row, and Singapore and Silverstone, 2 races that just went a little bit against you in the end. You didn't quite come away with victory. After Silverstone, you were 19 points behind. Did it ever feel like the title was slipping away at that sort of mid-season point, or was there always the confidence of, I can come back from this?
At the mid-season point, it was still a weird feeling, because I never really had the idea of the championship still in my mind then. It only came about in the last 4 races of the season, probably. The strategies basically coming from behind every single race. I would like to say, that was for the cameras, but it wasn't. It was just maybe a bit of a poor strategy decision from us every round. But it was quite fun. That was what I liked to do. I liked using the tyres, pushing as hard as I can. That's kind of my thing. I don't want to be tyre saving and making it boring for myself, because I'll lose focus and I'll drop back to 10th in the middle of the race. But the battle with Jannick, it didn't really feel like much of a battle, because we were never really on track together until the last few laps of the race, because then obviously I came back from 10 seconds behind or something like that. Every battle that I remember with him, being on track with him, was really clean, and I've got to say, good job and thank you to him. Like he drove incredibly. There was no wrongdoing from him, and I would like to say no wrongdoing from me, but Kota was a little bit of a different one. But I've got to say, Jannick deserved that title as much as I did, and it all really came down to that last race, and I'm really happy that it turned out the way it did.
I think Jannick was probably feels a similar sense of admiration for your abilities, especially because he didn't protest you after that the way that Kota ended. But my next question is about your moves. There's a lot of moves you did this season. There was one on Jerne Simoncic where you went round the outside at the Singapore Sling with just a handful of laps to go for second position. That was a fantastic move. Is there a favourite among those, or is there another one that springs to mind for you?
Another one that does spring to mind, it's not my favourite, but it's up there, was my move around the outside of Jannick at Australia for the lead.
Oh, that's very true.
Because that was just...
And that was your first win as well.
That was my first win. Never been in such a position before. The nerves were up there. It was a good move. It wasn't the most difficult one with the massive straight that there is. The slipstream was a bit crazy there, but I mean, I don't think there was any better move than the one around the outside of Jerne at Singapore. That was very opportunistic. I saw he made that little mistake, and I just put down the battery and just tried sending it and hoping that I wouldn't get pushed into the wall or pushed off track. And I believe that Jerne is a brilliant racer, a brilliant driver, and I did have almost full faith in him to, keep it safe on the inside and not clatter the curb. And thankfully he left me enough space, and I had the tyres to grip to go around the outside, and if I made that move one lap earlier, I could have been able to make the move for the lead. So obviously there was a little downside to that one after struggling to get past Jerne for a few laps, but it kind of made it a little bit more sweeter, struggling for the few laps before.
Yeah, hard fought and hard earned, and really any move on Simoncic is going to be hard fought and hard earned. Any move at Singapore is going to be difficult, and move on Simoncic at Singapore in the when the stakes are that high is very, very difficult. Final question on this season specifically: if you had to pick a favourite drive out of one race that you did this season, which race would you go for and why?
I think even though I didn't win it, Singapore was my favourite. Just apart from the first stint being stuck behind Jerne, the amount of focus that I had to have, the amount of pace that I had to have to gain back that time after making one stop extra, was incredible how I kind of dealt with it. I never thought I would be able to even catch up to Jerne. I thought, I'll be able to pass Mitchie and whoever else it was, and then maybe if I'm lucky I'll be on the back end of the top two. But the focus needed to drive absolutely on the edge around Singapore for 20 or so laps was, I still don't know how I didn't crash, to be honest. It was kind of more laid back after I made that last pit stop, because I don't think I had the belief that I was going to win. Which was, quite weird. But speaking to my engineer, Laurent, and kind of joking with him, maybe I'll be able to get him. And then seeing the gap come down by a second and a half, kept going down so much, so quickly per lap, I thought, maybe I can actually do this. And then obviously making that move around the outside of Mitchie and then Jerne was... yeah, nice. And if I overtook Jannick on the final lap, or if there was an extra lap, I think I wouldn't ever have a race quite like that. Never have a race better than that. It was almost perfect.
Wow, yeah, that's great to hear, because Singapore seems to be a happy hunting ground. I think back to last year in GPV Superlights, that's where you sealed the title as well. Despite having a lot of damage on that car, you still got that second place that you needed that day, and it was a turning point, like you say, arguably this season as well. So yeah, fantastic. I think I would agree with you completely there. So final question, Owen, before I let you go. Now that you've got an FSR title to your name, which not a lot of people under the age of 20 can say, let's be honest. What interests you most going forward? Becoming a multiple FSR world champion in the vein of Bono House, Jene Simoncic, or becoming the first ever FSR and Super League champion, which nobody's done in the 23 or so years that both championships have existed? Or have you got your sights set elsewhere in the world of sim racing entirely?
Honestly, I'm not too sure yet. I don't think I will.
That's like
be
what
doing
Jene said
GP...
last year to me as well.
Wow, yeah. I don't think I'll be doing GPV next season unless, I do make a decision to drive in Super League right at the last minute, but I think that's probably off the cards at the moment. FSR, obviously, we'll have to see what happens. Hopefully there is another season where I can be at the top again and try and defend the title. It would be really nice to get 2 in a row, but it's way too early to say anything about what's going to happen next season in FSR. I'm pretty sure I will be driving to defend the title next season in FSR, and obviously I'm going to try and branch out of R-Factor and go start driving iRacing, maybe a bit of LMU as well. But I haven't really got any sights of anything further than that. I'm just gonna get to grips with driving on other sims and see what happens. But definitely FSR next season.
Absolutely great to hear.
I will be there.
Thank you very much for talking to us, Owen, and congrats again on the 2024 FSR World Championship, which was fully deserved, and you really made a huge impression on a lot of people this season, and I'm sure we're going to see even more great drives from you in the future, and I promise I'm going to be working behind the scenes with the other admins to try and keep FSR going next season as best I can. And we've also got the Winter Series going, I guess, before that, which is going to be a series of IndyCar races. So whether you're taking part or just watching, hope you have a good time. And thank you very much to viewers at home for watching as well. And I hope you've enjoyed watching FSR in 2024. Bye for now.
Well, I was going to say, goodbye. Thank you very much for your time.